Subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear exclusive interviews, game highlights, along with thoughts and comments from King James Radio Network founder Corbett Thompson, including rants about his beloved New York Mets.
Hey guys, Corbett Thompson here for the King James Radio Network at jamesisking.com as we give you our North Brunswick Raiders baseball mid-season report as we take a look back at the past half year, if you will, the past 14 games for the North Brunswick Raiders baseball team here in Central New Jersey. Of course, the guys play over at Guido de Torres Field right behind me here, literally almost right behind me. Actually, it's out that way in the backdrop. With that being said, of course, the baseball team had the weekend off this weekend, last playing on Thursday when they went out and beat South River in a Mercy Rule win. And so now, after starting the year at 1-7, the Raiders have slowly turned things around, and they are now 5-9 on the year. As a matter of fact, I'm just looking at my board here. North Brunswick has won 4 of their last 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 of their last 6. And so again, after starting off the year at 1-7, they are now 5-9, and at least making themselves a little bit more relevant in the GMC, and maybe not so much for the GMC White division. I think that's pretty much gone by the boards. Matter of fact, if I'm correct, I don't think, based on tiebreaker rules, if I'm correct, I don't believe they can win the division at this point just based on tiebreaker rules, because they lost twice to South Plainfield, who is currently in first place in the division. But with that being said, the Raiders, of course, still have plenty of opportunity left to make some noise in the Greater Middlesex Conference and in the state playoffs too. As of last week, the Raiders were, if the playoffs had started, at the beginning of last week, the Raiders would be in the 12 spot. According to NJ.com, they'd be in the 12 spot in terms of their power points. So they would go and face Manalapan in the first round. So that would be the matchup. So even with the record not being where they want it to be, the Raiders still have some things that they can play for. And listen, they lost the first 2 games of the year to South Plainfield, losing on opening day, and then losing the second game at home where they had a 5-1 lead at home and just couldn't put the game away. They brought in their 3 sophomore pitchers, Tyler Summer, Ariel Regalado, and David Nazario, and those guys had to learn on the fly. All of them making their varsity debuts had to learn on the fly. Baptism by fire, and it's been that way throughout the course of the season. And since that time, since that game, each one of those guys has picked up their first varsity win. Tyler Summer has his, David Nazario has his, and Ariel Regalado has his. And as a matter of fact, the Raiders have 5 different guys with a win. So it's funny that they're 5-9, and the 5 wins have come from, each one of them have come from a different pitcher, including senior lefty Christian Petrillo and also Andrew Tan. So I'm not sure that how much head coach Mark Blevins was going to use Tan originally this year on the mound. I'm not sure if that was part of his original plan to use Tan as he has. Tan, who pitched only 7 innings last year, has already pitched 23 1/3 innings to this point this year. So I'm not sure if that was part of the original plan. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But Tan has certainly become an integral part of the starting rotation here. Now, of course, you've got 2 guys in the aforementioned Christian Petrillo and Andrew Tan who are college commits. Petrillo's going to Southern New Hampshire, Tan going to Binghamton University next year. And so around them, you have a lot of guys, a lot of other guys. Now, the returning guys that you have, Sean Berhini, who's a senior, and then the 2 juniors, Caleb Rodriguez and Dylan Glassman, both guys hitting at the top of the order. But behind them, you have a lot of other younger guys that, again, we talk about baptism by fire. And we talked about the 3 sophomore pitchers, but also junior first baseman Dylan Farrell as an example. Again, him getting acclimated to the varsity level. Farrell has 3 RBI so far on the year. Derek Rossman Rossman getting acclimated. He's played in different spots. He's DH'd. He's played the outfield, and he's got 2 RBIs on the year. So you have different guys. Anthony Partizano was just got his first varsity start last week. So the younger guys now starting to get in. Omar Carreras, who's a freshman, he got a taste of varsity, but because he's struggled a little bit at the plate. Probably just needs a little more seasoning in JV. And so you have guys that are on the horizon, if you will. Maybe not so much for this year, but for next year, for this North Brunswick team. So with that being said, I should mention Paul Kukler as well, who's done a lot of courtesy running, pinch running for the Raiders. As some not spot starts, but some spot appearances on the mound as well. So a lot of moving parts, and maybe, just maybe, now with this forward, having won 4 of their last 6, maybe the Raiders have started to figure some things out. I mean, there were some tough losses in there, earlier in the year. We mentioned the 2 losses to South Plainfield to open the season. So you start the year at 0-2, and you start to wonder where the season's going. And then they come back and they beat Colonia on the road at Colonia. Christian Petrillo beating their ace, Nick Nielsen, by a score of 1-0. And, it just goes from there. The Old Bridge game, the game at Old Bridge where Regalado started, I'm sure the Raiders, were kicking themselves for that one. Listen, in the 9 losses that they've had this year, 7 of those games, they have either been tied or had the lead in 7 of the 9 losses this year. The shutout to South Plainfield was the one game that they weren't in. The other one would be the 4-0 loss to Hillsborough in the Autism Awareness Baseball Challenge at North Brunswick Community Park. So those are the only 2 games that they really weren't in, this year. Every other game they have been. So a big win against Monroe, going on the road, beating Monroe, big win there. That's where Tyler Summer got his first win in relief, in 3 innings of relief. So big win for the Raiders there. And obviously a big win over St. Joe's, in which Christian Petrillo got his 100th career hit, a 2-run homer to win the game in the bottom of the 7th inning against Joe's, a game in which the Raiders had a 5-1 lead until Joe's came back and scored 5 runs. But then the Raiders were able to come back on, similar to the Sayreville game last year with Damian Ortiz's walk-off homer, similar to that game. That was even a higher scoring game than this one. Petrillo is on a 6-game hitting streak. Andrew Tan is heated up with the bat as of late. So those 2 guys, getting going now, and probably no coincidence that this team has started to trend upward with those 2 guys, getting going at the plate. So obviously, those 2 guys, especially with the bottom of the order being as young as it is, those 2 guys, more or less, and again, with Dylan Glassman and Caleb Rodriguez at the top of the order, obviously pitching in, but Chich and, Petrillo and Tan, those 2 guys in the middle of the order are obviously the heart and soul of the Raiders lineup. So, with that being said, big win in terms of not so much the score, but big win in terms of beating South River, winning back-to-back games for the first time this year. And so that's going to be, I think, huge going forward. They'll try to make it 3 in a row when they play Woodbridge coming up. It'll be tomorrow at the time of this recording. But we'll have our Raiders Live pregame at 3:45 p.m. and first pitch at 4 p.m. Eastern Time at jamesisking.com. So a big 2-game series coming up against Woodbridge, where the Raiders are trying to get out of last place in the GMC White Division, and Woodbridge is the team that's directly in front of them. They are 1 game ahead of the Raiders, and so North Brunswick will try to, if they can get the 2-game sweep, they'll get out of the basement. And so there's 7 teams in the GMC White Division, so Woodbridge in 6th place at the moment, and then followed by Sayreville, and then Colonia, and then St. Joe's, and then Edison, and then South Plainfield. And with the GMC tournament not that far away, the Raiders would love to get out of the basement, maybe even catch Sayreville. Now, they lost both of their games to Sayreville, so that's going to be a little bit more difficult. But if they can get out of there, out of last place, that'll at least give something for the GMC seating committee to think about, that type of thing. But during the time where the Raiders were 1-7, it just seemed like one thing or another broke down. It seemed like the pitching didn't. If it wasn't the pitching, it was the defense. If it wasn't the defense, it was the lineup. If there's something always breaking down, and so I think now a few of those things have started to come together here in the second half of the season. So again, I mentioned Christian Petrillo and Andrew Tan starting to hit. Ariel Regalado maybe finding his groove a little bit. I think the Raiders, I think the coaches are really high on him as far as the future with him over these next couple of years. And getting guys at the bottom of the order, chipping in here and there. So I think you are starting to see some things come together. Now it just has to be consistent over these next couple of weeks leading into the GMC tournament. So, we'll see what happens. Again, the Raiders have a 2-game series, a home and home against Woodbridge coming up, a home and home against Edison on Thursday and Friday. We'll have the game on Thursday at home against Edison. And then next Sunday, they will be at TD Bank Ballpark against South Brunswick. We'll have that game. Senior Day against Piscataway coming up. I haven't made a decision yet on that. That's a whole other story. But Senior Day against Piscataway coming up. And that'll be right in the middle of when the GMC tournament starts. So it'll be a busy week that next week for the baseball team. By the way, I mentioned Christian Petrillo getting his 100th hit. Andrew Tan not that far away. Unofficially, he needs 13 more to get to 100. So if he has like a 3-hit day or a 4-hit day, that will accelerate that process. So with that, I'm going to go. And I will talk to you guys, at jamesisking.com. Coming up, when the Raiders will take on Woodbridge, and look forward to that. You got Petrillo and probably Tan going for Woodbridge with Ariel Regalado now in the fold. So, the Raiders, again, have started to solidify some things, and that specifically goes to their pitching, where they started to solidify some roles that these guys are in. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Corbett Thompson for the King James Radio Network saying goodbye, Godspeed. Thank you for listening to our North Brunswick Raiders baseball midseason report, and we will talk to you again on the air. All right, bye-bye.